Julie, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the trends that you've seen in third party risk and some of the challenges, given that you've worked in a couple of organizations which probably get a lot of attention on cybersecurity in general. So, what are some of the challenges that you've seen organizations face?
Sure. So just to start, third-party risk management is really not a new concept, but it is increasing in importance. And especially after the year that we've had, it's really due to threat landscape growing in complexity, organizations having a greater reliance on their third parties to support critical functions, digital transformations occurring in organizations, and also environmental threats such as a pandemic. So there's also a really big increase in regulatory scrutiny on organizations. And this is really to make sure that organizations are making sure their third parties are complying with regulations. So when regulators are coming into these companies, they're no longer allowing organizations to say, hey, did you make sure your vendor are they in compliance with regulations? You actually have to evidence that they are. So there's just an increase in scrutiny around that. I would say in the last 10 to 20 years, finance and healthcare really have been ahead of the game on third-party risk management programs. So we usually model off of them more so, but an increased trend due to all of this regulatory threat landscape, increase in risk is that more industries are joining the game. So with all of that said, really the trends and the issues that I'm seeing is a trend, obviously, in more focus on third-party risk management programs. And it's not just from a cyber perspective anymore. There's an increased focus on a plethora of other activities, such as financial controls, operational controls, environmental social impacts, which is actually a newer trend. And really those environmental social impacts are top of mind for board discussions nowadays. So it really refers to how companies are responding to environmental awareness, social practices, and how they're governing their own organizations. So we're looking at labor laws and practices. We're looking at environmental controls such as gas emissions, and just in general, how organizations are governing risk. So there's just an increase in visibility in what we're assessing as a third-party risk management program, and how we are adding to our contracts to make sure that we set that expectation for our vendors on what we're going to assess, and using that information to make meaningful decisions as an organization.
That's such a great point, because I think we tend to think of third party risk in the security industry as a security issue. But actually,
Right.
if you're managing it, you've got a whole range of risks and issues to cover.
Absolutely. And we're being asked to do more with less, obviously. That's a common issue in all organizations. But what you can do from a resource perspective is really ask other teams within your organization to help. So if you want to do a financial review, then ask your finance team to help with it. If you want to do a disaster recovery business continuity review and review a vendor's plans and testing, ask your DRBC teams to help. We're really asking companies to include the entire organization in the risk assessment process instead of just one team, because risk really is the responsibility of the entire organization. There's also tools that are coming out that where you can not only send questionnaires to your vendors through the tool set, but they're also validating the responses to those questions. So instead of just having that checklist, which is not going to fly anymore, you are actually validating their responses through either risk monitoring tools or bumping them up against, Dun and Bradstreet databases. There's a plethora of public information out there now, and these service providers are using it to validate vendor responses, which also helps with, resource constraints, because they're doing, part of the work for you.
And do you see that from the regulators as well, that they want more of that continuous monitoring and more of that validation?
Yes, they want to know that you're not just looking at them at one point in time throughout the year, but every time you see a threat or something come up in the environment, that you are asking your vendors questions around that. What are the impacts? Did it affect my data? What are you doing about it? And evidencing that they they have controls in place to address those threats when they come up. Also, it's not just no longer, like I said, about the questionnaires. You really have to form relationships with your vendors and, do site visits. The questionnaire is a good tool to kind of get a baseline for what organizations are doing, but those on-site visits are really where the rubber meets the road. And I know that's been hard due to COVID, and a lot of people have been doing them virtually, but you do get a lot more, you get different responses when you're face-to-face with these vendor organizations, asking them the same questions as on the questionnaire, because maybe they wrote it in a specific way, but maybe the way that they implemented it is different, and you will get that out of a site visit. So that's really important that I don't see all organizations doing. More mature programs are, but the newer ones just don't have the time. But you really you can start with 5 a year. Just start doing site visits. It's really important. And the other item is contract support. So in order to do all of this, in order to assess your vendors, in order to set expectations, enhancing your contracts are key. So beefing up your right to audit, yes, but I would also suggest having addendums around assessments, which is different than an audit in my mind, because audit is internal audits coming in, they're doing a formal assessment, there's going to be findings. An assessment allows you to continuously monitor your vendors, continuously send them certain surveys or questionnaires for evidence throughout the year, so that you're not just doing that one and done. And you can even put in there that they have to answer the questions within this, time frame, and put in compliance triggers. And the compliance triggers are if they aren't complying with certain regulations or clauses in the contract, this is what will happen next. And that is important, because if you don't have teeth to your contract, there's nothing that you can do if they're not complying. So a trigger might be if you aren't patching critical patches within 7 days, then we can come and do an on-site visit. And if the on-site visit goes bad, then we can term the contract. The triggers can look different, but that's just an example of what you would want to have in a contract to ensure that you can do something about any kind of failures.
Do you get pushback very much from the business and your business partners on that, or are they understanding why that's in there?
At first you will, yes. If this is a newer kind of concept for your organization, there will be a lot of pushback, but businesses should understand that they are the owners of the risk. It is not the third-party program or facilitators, it is the business. And if something were to happen, it's on them. And so you want to make sure they understand that concept. They understand why you're asking certain questions, what you're going to get out of it, and the impact risks could have on the organization. And these conversations need to happen regularly, because businesses are always turning over. You're getting new vendor owners. So it's important that everyone understands why you're doing this and the impact it could have if you don't.
Now, you've set up an association to help organizations with this. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. So ThirdParty Risk Association is a not-for-profit organization. And we were really built out of a necessity to further the profession through knowledge sharing and networking. We are the only vendor agnostic association for third-party risk professionals, and we bring all sides of the community together. So not just the practitioner side, but the service provider side as well, because we believe that rising tide raises all ships. So it's important for us to have both sides so that when we are working on guidance or templates, that both sides agree to it and can implement it easily. So some of the things that we offer, we're a membership-based company. And with your membership, we have regular meetings and the topics are chosen by our members. And basically, each topic is a pain point that the organizations have within their program. And we regularly bring in subject matter experts to speak on those pain points. We have regular virtual conferences. We are planning our first in-person conference next year. Due to COVID, we couldn't do that before, so we're really excited. We have areas on our website just for members. So it includes forums and newsletters. You can post jobs. You can share best practices and tools and templates and white papers. And then we also have a LinkedIn page where we communicate all of our events coming up and, show the blogs that we're posting about. And then to come, as a community, we're working on a guidebook. So any new third-party risk management program can pick it up and literally implement a program. And we're going to also, after that guidebook's published, work on company-specific training, because that is a question that we often get. Where can I go for this specific third-party risk management training? How can I implement a program? And we're trying to make that as easy as possible for our members.
Amazing. Well,
Yeah.
thank you for joining us and for sharing all of that today. And where can people get in touch with you if they want to find out more about the organization?
Sure. So you can go directly to our website, www.tprassociation.org, or you can email me, julie@tprassociation.org.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.